Hey guys, before we start the video, I just want to remind you that we recently started up a community Discord server, so hit that up to talk games, movies, music, and more. The link is down below. Also, we now have YouTube memberships turned on. It really helps keep this train chugging, so any support you could provide there would be awesome. Plus, if you do, you get access to exclusive emotes, private live streams, access to my DMs, and on top of all of that, you get to vote on the direction of the channel and what games you want me to make videos on. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell to be notified of any new uploads. The last thing I want to do before we get into the video is give a disclaimer. I am not a Call of Duty expert by any means. I play the games every year, but only for a week or two, so I'm not the most qualified to speak on the nuanced systems in the game. I will leave some links to some channels down below who do that far better than I ever could. As always, thanks for watching, it means the world. Modern Warfare 3 is awful. An honest-to-God tragedy. Now, full disclosure, I only played the multiplayer portion of the game as I don't feel qualified to speak on the zombies or campaign experiences because I almost never touch them. However, I will leave some links down below to other people's opinions on that, but surprise, surprise, they're also not very good. Calling Modern Warfare 3 a game is incredibly generous. Leaked last year as a DLC to 2022's Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3 feels like just that, a DLC. The game is laughably unpolished, bafflingly hollow, and such a blatant attempt for Activision to milk the billion-dollar IP that it honestly feels like a spit in the face as someone who's been buying and playing these games day one for over a decade now. I'm a Call of Duty fan! Sure, the games aren't perfect and they're a shell of what they used to be, but I still buy and have a good time with Call of Duty every year. The first exception to that being last year's Modern Warfare 2. While not terrible, there were some staggering issues with last year's entry that made it frustrating to play. The skill-based matchmaking was put to turbo mode, the progression system went from being level-based to challenge-based, and worst of all, the time to kill was so low that you were just dying left and right. Modern Warfare 2 just didn't feel right to me as a longtime player of the series. So I got my obligatory gold weapon camo and called it a day. But when I first saw multiplayer gameplay for Modern Warfare 3, I actually got kind of excited. Even though the game shared its bones with the prior entry, it looked like Sledgehammer were going to take many of the things that worked about MW2 and throw away what didn't. On top of that, they announced that all of the launch maps would be remakes of MW2 maps, but like 2009 MW2, not 2022 MW2, because there's two MW2s, the original and 2022 MW2. That's too many. There's too many twos! This sounded perfect for me as someone who loves that original game and loves the bones of the new one, but didn't enjoy any of the balancing that came along with them. So that brings us to today. I've played about 16 hours of multiplayer in MW2, I'm level 50 and have tried most of the core modes and have gone through my usual readjustment period. And I have some thoughts. Let's start with the good stuff, because there isn't much of it. First, they addressed the biggest problem with last year's MW2, which was the time to kill. It's a little higher here in MW3 and feels a bit more like classic Call of Duty, but it's still low. There's still plenty of times where I just get murdered by who knows what from who knows wheresville, but it does happen slightly less frequently than it did last year. The maps are also good. They're all just remakes of MW2 maps though. Like, really? For $70 we only get remakes? Like, I know we're in the good section, but it's really hard. I also really enjoyed the reintroduction of slide canceling. It makes movement flow better in the game and the arena is more fun to run around in. I'm still not sure how I feel about slide canceling as a mechanic in general since its introduction in Modern Warfare 2019, but I definitely like the movement in this game more than in last year's Call of Duty, so that's a step in the right direction. I also like the new game mode Cutthroat. It's a 3 versus 3 versus 3 round-based game mode that has no respawns. It's a lot like Gunfight from the past couple of COD games, but with a new twist. It's not a mode I'll play all the time, but it serves as a nice palate cleanser from my usual rotation of Hardpoint and Domination. The last thing I liked about the game was the new camos. They all look nice, especially the Mastery ones. But this segues me into my problems with the game. The way you unlock camos is the same as it was in MW2 last year, and it's so bafflingly idiotic that I honestly don't know where to begin. Camos in this game are a complete mess. They're just as bad as they were last year since they've made no changes. Essentially, each weapon in the armory has 4 unique camo challenges that must be completed in order to unlock the Gold Mastery camo. These camos are unique to each gun, but once you unlock the camo, you can apply them to any weapon you have unlocked. While this seems like a nice adjustment to the old formula, which required a heavy grind in order to unlock Mastery camos, here's the problem. It takes away the meaning. Each gold gun you had in older COD games used to feel meaningful. You had to work for it. Sure, it only took 3 to 4 hours to unlock gold on a weapon if you were good enough, but it still took dedication and commitment to different playstyles in lobbies. The reason for this is because the camo challenges used to incentivize a variety of playstyles to complete them. But with this new system, there is no depth to what the game wants you to do at all. The challenges will be as simple as get 50 headshot kills with this weapon, or get 50 kills while aiming down sights with this weapon. So naturally, this leads to the question of, why isn't everyone running around with gold on everything if it's that simple? And the answer to that is blocking player progression by making leveling weapons an impossible grind. This segues me into my next issue with the game, which is progression. Progression in MW3 moves at a snail's pace. This relates to the camo system because in order to unlock all camos on a weapon, you must level the weapon to its max level. I'm not an amazing COD player, but I'm also not bad. I average about 1 to 1.5 KD per game in most lobbies. After 16 hours of gameplay, I have yet to even get a weapon to half of its max level. Now, I know that this complaint is in direct contrast to my gripe about camos not requiring dedication to unlock, but let me explain. The grind in older CODs used to be about emphasizing different aspects of the game. For instance, challenges would be something like, get X number of kills while prone, or get X number of kills shortly after stunning an enemy. This made the leveling grind bearable because you went into each game with a goal of how you wanted to play. Sure, some of them were cringy and you felt a bit dirty afterwards, but it was all in service of getting the sweet ecstasy provided by applying that gold camo to your favorite weapon. Now, every lobby starts with you just going in trying to maximize your personal stats. While this seems like a sensible design decision, it takes away some of the fun that came from experimenting with different styles of play. Sure, you can still experiment, but the game doesn't give you a reason to do so. Sledgehammer realized this was an issue with last year's MW2 and have tried to rectify it by changing the way weapon and equipment unlocks work in MW3. On top of unlocking equipment and weapons by leveling up, you are also able to unlock them faster by completing armory challenges. You can complete a maximum of 6 armory challenges a day, with each of them incentivizing you to play the game in a slightly different way. The problem with this isn't the challenges themselves, but more so how bare bones they are compared to the older style of challenges that the camo system had. These challenges will be something like, get 2 kills with a Semtex, or get 20 operator kills with a submachine gun. I've played 16 hours of this video game and I still have no idea what the fuck operator kills are, but apparently I keep getting them because I've never tried to achieve one of these, yet I've completed them every time they've popped up. I mean, these challenges are fine as a supplemental grind, but they aren't fleshed out enough to serve as one of the core pillars of the grind. In general, all of the progression in this game feels like a watered-down gacha game bullshit designed to keep you logging on every day and spending more money. It's grotesque business in my opinion because these challenges just exist to give you a reason to log in every day, but they aren't substantial enough in their own right to provide any satisfaction upon completion. In turn, they expect you to spend money to get that satisfaction. Speaking of spending money, you can barely open this game without Activision trying to goad you into spending even more money on the already full-priced $70 game. If you hover over the Battle Pass tab by mistake, you are forced to click on notices and stay on the screen longer than you would like. If you are setting up classes to use in matches, you are always shown the Armory tab, which sells you pre-made setups called blueprints that you have to pay money for. It's all over this game, and it's shameless. Some free-to-play mobile games have more tact in their monetization practices. On top of the shameless marketing, a lot of these bundles are egregiously expensive. You pay $24 for a character skin that you rarely see because the majority of the game is in first person, and 2 weapon blueprints that are dog shit and require you to Frankenstein them to make them usable. This is wild. For a company as money hungry as Activision clearly is, you'd think they would put more work into making these weapon blueprints more appealing. I mean, I'll take this monetization over the loot box riddled pay-to-win systems of the past games, but it's still just gross to me and I wouldn't feel right not taking the time to call it out in this review. Another thing I need to call out in this review is the maps. Now, earlier in this review, I said the maps were a high point in this game, and most of them are. I'd rather have a dominatrix step on my ballsack for 3 hours than ever play Wasteland again in my life, but aside from that, they're good. The problem, however, lies not in the maps themselves, but in what they represent. The fact that Activision feels comfortable releasing a game comprised entirely of remade maps speaks volumes to how much respect they have for the fans. Even though I personally love these maps, I must put that aside and call out bad business when I see it. Activision had a problem when thinking about Call of Duty 2023. For those that don't know, Call of Duty games are generally made on a 3-year timeline by 3 different studios switching off every year. In 2021, Sledgehammer released Vanguard. In 2022, Infinity Ward released MW2, meaning that COD 2023 should have been developed by Treyarch. But Treyarch's next Call of Duty game wasn't ready to be released yet. This left Activision with 3 options. 1, release Treyarch's COD in whatever state it was in, regardless of polish. 2, skip the 2023 release entirely and just update Modern Warfare 2. Or 3, have Sledgehammer develop an entirely new game in 16 months. Activision chose option 3. 16 months may sound like a long time, but in game development terms, that is nothing. Developing a AAA game from the ground up in 24 months is a nearly impossible task these days, let alone 16. So this left Sledgehammer in a really shitty position. Sledgehammer decided the best course of action for COD 2023 was to reuse assets and ideas from previous Call of Duty games in an attempt to release a game that wasn't just unfinished. Instead, they released a game that doesn't have an identity or a vision of its own. No hate for this game should be thrown at Sledgehammer. It should all be thrown at Activision for forcing Sledgehammer into this position. But I've spent enough time talking about the external factors of the game. It's time to dive into the moment-to-moment gameplay of Modern Warfare 3. The gameplay of MW3 is a very mixed bag. There are certain things about it that I like, and some things so impossible to comprehend that I struggle to find the words. Call of Duty always feels good though. Guns are satisfying to shoot, utility feels powerful enough to counter most of the bullshit, and racking up kills to get score streaks will never not be entertaining. The core fundamentals of a good Call of Duty are here, but they're surrounded by lack of polish, boring weapons, and terrible spawns that just entirely kill any sense of fun that may have been found here. Let's start with the lack of polish, because this shit is so unpolished that I can see the rust. There were many times where movement just felt broken. Maybe I'm just bad, but there were so many times where I was trying to mantle over walls, climb onto ladders, or just run up a hill where my movement was completely halted by the tiniest little roadblock. One time I spent 20 seconds straight just trying to get onto a fucking ladder. At first, I tried to jump onto it from the top of a nearby box. When that didn't work, I tried to jump on it from the ground. And when that didn't work, I tried looking at it and pressing X. That was when it started to work, but then I lagged into the wall and was back on the ground before finally trying it for a fourth time and achieving success. I would say the last one might be my fault due to internet stutter, but it's not. The game's servers are just that bad. I've had horrendous rubber banding regardless of the quality of my internet at the time, so I'm not inclined to give benefit of the doubt in this instance. Speaking of rubber banding, there were 3 separate occurrences where I was rubber banding horribly despite my internet up and down being perfectly acceptable for online play. The rubber banding didn't stop regardless of the lobby until I closed and relaunched the game and it was inexplicably gone. How one of the biggest gaming franchises in the world has worse servers than online games that are 1/10 the size baffles me, but it's the world we live in. Speaking of lack of polish, the greatest sin of this game is that I couldn't even fucking play it on my platform of choice. I pre-ordered the game on PC as I like to play FPS games on a keyboard and mouse, but I couldn't get it to launch. I spent over an hour trying to get it to work, diving into files, following guides, and clearing the cache before just uninstalling and reinstalling. Nothing worked, so I refunded my Steam copy and bought it on PS5. This is flat out unacceptable. Releasing a AAA game in this state, hell, any game that just won't launch on some mid to high-end gaming PCs is just totally unacceptable, and if I wasn't trying to make a video on this game, I wouldn't have bought it at all after that. It's not just me either. This is a common problem. So common that some of the troubleshooting videos I was looking at had hundreds of thousands of views. This is insane! If I wanted to break down every single technical issue I had with this game, this video would be over an hour, so I'm just gonna move on now. Let's discuss the weapons in the game. This has to be the lamest collection of weapons I've ever seen in a base Call of Duty game ever. Every sniper is either slow and bad or semi-auto and clunky. The assault rifles and SMGs have less diversity amongst themselves than ever before, and the rest of the arsenal that I've tried ranges from bland to bad. In fact, if it weren't for the weapons that remained from MW2 last year, I genuinely don't think this game would even be playable. I don't remember a single name of a gun in this game, and I was playing it 30 minutes ago. There's the Uzi-looking one, the shitty sniper, the AK-looking gun, etc. Aside from that, I honestly don't even remember what they look like. This is wild from a series that's produced iconic weapons like the DSR-50, the Intervention, and the Galil. Yes, all weapons in these games are based off of real-world counterparts, but the fact that the guns in this game are so unmemorable is shocking to me. I've never played a AAA FPS with such unremarkable guns. Especially since when playing this game, 95% of the time, you're staring at only a gun. All of the guns from last year's MW2 are still here though, which rectifies that a little bit, but that's not fun to me. Remember when a new game used to be new? The reason for this crossover probably relates to the fact that development of this game started as a DLC, so they were building the game around having those weapons available, but it just feels weird to me. I don't like paying $70 for a game and having half of the content just be crossover content from the last game. Like, sure, you don't have to interact with it, but when new content is so bland and stale, you kinda do have to interact with it. Not to mention, you're putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage if you don't. If you like sniping, you cannot play this game without using weapons from last year's game, or you will have a terrible time. There's only one new bolt-action sniper rifle, and it's painfully slow and cumbersome. Even when maximizing a build to make it as fast as possible, it was too slow. Another thing that's slow is the journey from your spawn point to the objective. Spawns in this game are horrendous. They honestly feel worse than they did in the original iterations of these maps in 2009. Now, that's probably not true, to be clear, but they're definitely not good. First, a lot of the spawn points are ridiculously far away from the objectives on the map. This issue was particularly bad on Wasteland, Invasion, and Derail. On top of these issues, there were also so many times where I spawned directly into an enemy's line of sight. I mean, I expect this on smaller maps like Rust, but when it's happening on a map as big as Terminal, it feels kind of insane. This is always an issue in Call of Duty games, but it definitely feels worse here. I'm not a technical guy, so I'm not really in a position to break down if this is actually the case or not, and I'll leave that to people who are better at analytics, but it definitely feels worse than usual. Another thing that feels worse than usual is loadout customization. Loadout customization in Call of Duty has changed a lot since the release of Modern Warfare 2019. The reason for this is the ridiculous amount of specific-ass attachments that have nearly unnoticeable effects on the weapons on their own. There used to be attachments like Quick Draw Grip or Long Shot Barrel. Now we have 10 different barrels that do essentially the same thing, but to slightly different degrees with different strengths and weaknesses. I recognize that some people really love this shit and play Call of Duty every week, year-round, and enjoy these nuances, but to your average person who jumps on a few times a year for a week at a time, such as myself, the system is woefully unapproachable and overwhelming. I don't want to have to do 3 hours of science experiments to build a weapon that feels good. I also don't want to follow a cookie-cutter YouTube optimization guide that 90% of the player base is using. Again, I recognize that this may appeal to a certain dedicated portion of the fan base, and I respect that, but this is my YouTube channel, so fuck you. This loadout issue isn't a Call of Duty specific issue though. It's an issue that's been spreading across the games industry since the release of Destiny. This marginal upgrade / pros and cons approach to game design is just not for me. It's not even exclusive to multiplayer games anymore. The new Assassin's Creed games have it, and it looks like the new Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game is gonna have it. While Destiny wasn't the game to invent this, it certainly is the moment in gaming where nearly every AAA studio started to subscribe to this design philosophy. I get it too. It's not an inherently bad design philosophy. In fact, in theory, I think it's a really cool approach to gear and loadout customization and can keep players engaged in the nuances of systems for countless hours. The problem for me is that I don't play Call of Duty 12 months a year, and I have no desire to do so. I like to hop on at launch for a couple weeks, hit max level, and then move on. But with a design philosophy like this, that task becomes more and more impossible each year. I'll be the first to acknowledge, though, that this aspect of the game is less a fault of the game and more of a personal gripe. The last thing I want to talk about is the skill-based matchmaking that's been plaguing not only this game, but all casual multiplayer games for the last decade. My issues with it are different from the criticisms I've seen online from most people too. Most people don't like skill-based matchmaking because they want to go into every lobby shitting on noobs. I understand the appeal of this. Shitting on noobs is fun. But I also understand why Activision doesn't want this. They don't want the potential new whales to be turned away from the game because they get absolutely shit on in every lobby they play. My problem with skill-based matchmaking is that it encourages the worst of playstyles. Because of skill-based matchmaking, players are now so much more concerned with their KD ratio and maintaining it at or above a 1.0 to display their skill to others and brag about how hard their lobbies are on Reddit. People have always cared about KD, but since it's become common knowledge that the lobbies you get placed in are based off of KD, people have become much more concerned with it. The big problem with this is that it encourages players who care about these things to play the game in a way that makes it painfully unfun for anyone playing objective-based game modes with or against them. As someone who plays a pretty consistent rotation of hardpoint and domination, I find that almost every player in these lobbies is playing solely for their personal stats. They sit miles away from the objectives with a sniper or spend half the game just searching for enemy spawns to rack up kills without ever putting work into playing the objective. Players like this have always existed, don't get me wrong, but it feels like everyone plays the game like this now. There was a hardpoint game where for nearly the entire game, I was the only person on my team to even touch the hardpoint. This isn't necessarily a problem with the game itself, but rather a problem with how the game goes about rating players based on skill. It appears KD is the only stat considered when rating a player's skill. I could be totally wrong on this, and I'm probably in a tiny minority here, but I'm fine with that. It's just how I feel. Alright, I've yapped on for long enough. It's time to close this bad boy out. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is a disaster on nearly every level. From bad progression to bad technical issues, bad weapons, entirely reused maps, annoying loadout, building, and disgusting monetization practices, MW3 cements itself as the worst entry in this series I've ever played. It's so bad that it really has me questioning whether I will buy next year's release, and that's saying a lot coming from someone who has never even considered skipping a year of this franchise. I've been playing COD for years. I have a lot of deep-seated nostalgia for this franchise, but that can only take me so far. This series has evolved to a point where it feels like you need a bachelor's degree in Virgin to play each new entry. Also, the way Activision treated Sledgehammer is just brutal. Forcing a team to make a full-fledged $70 game in 16 months is just disgusting. It puts so much unfair pressure on people behind the scenes who just want to make a good game for the fans, but cannot do so because of taxing nearly release schedules imposed on them by C-suite executives. In no world can I recommend this game to anyone but the series' most diehard fans, and even then, I would strongly encourage them to try other shooters. I'm going to give Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 a 1 out of 4. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment to let me know how you feel about Modern Warfare 3. I genuinely want to know what diehard fans think of the multiplayer in this game. Anyway, see you next Friday. Bye.